So the DI. At Park Road, we had three main teams, the online, the grade, and the stereo team, which I lead. And we all work simultaneously in 24 and 48 in the online. Now, the workflow was optimized so we could have last-minute changes, work in parallel, all on that same source data. So quite efficient, but really fast at the same time. And there was continuous development phases of looks and things like that with the DOP and the directors. So we had close collaboration throughout, right the way from rushes all the way through to final DI. So today we're going to look at the unique way Park Road supports the ever more immersive experiences, for the audience, for you guys. Now we're going to focus on the sort of 3D production we've just finished, the Desolation of Smaug. And as Gilly mentioned, it was not only HFR but also Dolby Atmos. So yeah, I'll let Gilly explain a bit about Dolby Atmos.
I guess we're kind of more picture focused to this event. So I'm just going to talk you through Dolby Atmos a little bit. Do have a slight disclaimer that we're actually going to be listening in 5.1 in this room. So you're not hearing an Atmos. There's no speakers hidden in the ceiling or anything like that. A lot of the creative decisions were originally taken for this 5.1 and 7.1 was mixed up and down mixed for 5.1. But we sort of translated some of that, intent into the Atmos mix, and sort of there's quite a few differences in the actual mix. So I'm just going to go through just some of the sound formats, leading up to Atmos, just really quickly, just so we're all on the same page. So we start with obviously mono into stereo, and then we go to Dolby stereo, where we had like a left, center, right channel and a mono surround. 5.1, where we've got stereo surrounds, so we've got like discrete channels and stereo surrounds, and 7.1, where we have side surrounds and back surrounds. So it's kind of, you get very quickly the idea that sort of in the progression, the evolution of sound formats, we're really just adding a couple of channels each time, and it's kind of progressing like that, and it's pretty sort of slow, and it gives us something different each time, but it's not really a big jump. Whereas Atmos is actually quite a big jump in the way we think about sound formats. So if we just go on to the next slide. So if we've got a 7.1 setup, this is the right side surround. So it's what we call an array. It's got the same sound content played to each of those speakers on the wall. And the idea is that it covers like a large area of the audience, but it does kind of smear the sound, like having, that. So if we take a sound from the screen onto that side surround, it just sort of smears up the wall. So the idea with Atmos is that we have the ability to send signal directly to each individual speaker in that array. So not only we can address it as an array, but we can actually take a sound and move it from the screen front to back to front through each individual speaker. So it's the idea of giving more of a naturalistic sort of approach to sound. So it's more defined, more point sourcey, and it's more how we kind of hear in the real world. So on top of that, we've also extended the surrounds towards the screen, so there's better connection to the screen in terms of bringing sounds off. And we also have bass management of the surrounds. So the idea with the bass management is that as we bring sounds off the screen, instead of losing kind of the timbre and it holding together really well, we actually sort of retain some of the timbre from the big speakers that are behind the screen, and we can move the sound sort of more fluidly into the auditorium, for the audience. On top of that, one of the more fun aspects is that we now have speakers in the ceiling, which is something that as a mixer we've been sort of asking for quite a while. And it allows us to really move the sound around the audience, but also over and above the audience. So we're not, in the past where we've taken sound from the front, moved it to the back, it's sort of gone around the audience, and now we can really like feel it above us and moving around above us. So this next slide sort of basically shows the layout of Atmos. So you're adding a lot more speaker, a lot more power into the room. It addresses up to 64 channels, so 64 separate speakers. So during the mix, we use what we call a plugin. So we've got like a controller here. This is actually for, so if we take a sound, we call it an object, and we pan that object, and it has X, Y, Z coordinates as well as a size, so a decorrelation algorithm that can increase the number of speakers we use at once to move it through the auditorium. So what we do, that creates metadata. Now this is like the visual feedback we get of the objects in the 3D space there. The plugin creates metadata. That metadata is recorded in the studio. And when it goes to exhibition, we can actually take that metadata, so how the sound's moving through the room. We can take that, and on replay, it can look at the setup in a theatre, in an exhibition. It can look at that and decide the best way to move that sound through that auditorium. So in the theatre, we have about 32 speakers in our setup. If it goes to exhibition, there might only be 22 speakers in exhibition, and it can look at where they're placed in the room. There's a configuration file, and it can do, have the best way to pan a sound. So it's what it really gives us as sort of sound mix and stuff is a lot of confidence that what we do in the studio is taken to exhibition. And as we know, I think we talked about, Jean-Pierre Genet spoke about it yesterday, the standard of exhibition is just so key to everything we do, all the hours we spend on films. So hopefully that's, that's secured that a little bit. If people are investing in Atmos, they're investing in a better sound system, and it's good for us. Why is the collaboration between sound and picture so important, especially on a 3D production?
Yeah, so let's check out how these disciplines affect each other and how we work creatively together. So to start with, what we're going to do is look at a scene quite early on in the film of the unexpected, not the unexpected journey, Desolation of Smaug. We find Bilbo and the company in Beorn's house. They've just woken up after a nightmare chase, and now he's in a warm, safe environment. Sights and sounds of nature, bumblebees, the green, the grass, the horses, the mountains, it's all very comforting. And so what we're going to do here is basically play the DCP through, and as we play it through, what I'll ask for you to do is keep your glasses off so you can actually see some of the convergence animations and the creative choices as I narrate through it. So if we can flick over to the DCPs, guys, just have a look at the screen as I talk through what we did. So, just for anybody who's not aware of the sort of terminology of cut cushioning it's basically when you're converging from the outgoing shot into the incoming shot, typically over 10 to 15 frames. If we could just go back to the PowerPoint, guys. Now, this can vary depending on the length of the shots from the incoming to the outgoing. It can be like 5 frames, it can be a little bit more. It's all dependent on the post-stereographer. If we just go back to the PowerPoint, guys. And I'll let Gilly talk a bit more about the sound now.
As a sound scene, we're easing you in pretty gently. It's we've actually, like Meetal said, we've come out of a really dark encounter, and we're really trying to shift the mood. So most of the sounds are actually, apart from music, are sort of diegetic sounds. They're what's going on in the image. Pretty straightforward. What we tried to do with some of the movement in that is try to be playful. So where we've got this bumblebee, we try to move it out into the audience a little bit. With Atmos, we could use the overheads as well. But it's also the focus of the picture, so taking this extreme negative parallax and then jumping into the next shot. Hopefully the sound and the movement sort of help with the cut cushioning and draw you into the picture. So we used object panning, so we've got that naturalistic sort of sound to the sound to match the bumblebee. And hopefully that really sort of catches your ear. So movement and position are really important to us as soundies. And it's sort of that human nature that if you hear sound change, if you hear it move, you're drawn to it. And hopefully that helps with the eye following, the ear a little bit and, working in tandem, and helps with where you find yourself in the picture. It's in the case of object panning, sort of the bumblebees, it also is helpful with the CGI, I think, because that realism, that kind of grounded sort of sound that that we sort of associate with bumblebees and stuff like that, and use of positioning and sort of really feeling like we molded the bumblebee, the sound molds with the bumblebee. We sort of have that feeling that it's more real. We're adding to the real experience of that bumblebee. So we're sort of grounding the CGI in a bit of reality with the sound as well. So hopefully that will help. So if you put your glasses on now, we should hopefully be able to run that with sound. So it's 1.2 for the DCP.
Yep. Cool. So our next scene that we're going to look at, it's going to take us on. Here we go. Yeah. So our next scene that we're going to look at takes us on an enchanted journey through the weird world of Mirkwood. Now, here we see Bilbo and the company become highly frustrated, disorientated, and they're hallucinating. They're in this sort of weird world. Now, again, sound and picture had a huge role in shaping how the audience responds to this immersive world. So let's look at how this was achieved. Once again, I'm going to play the source without sound, and you can choose to keep your 3D glasses off again and see the convergence animations as I talk through it, or you can pop them on for the full 3D immersion. So, guys, if we roll the DCP 2.1. Okay, so Mirkwood, there's many foul creatures throughout that sort of scene, and the next bit we're going to look at is Bilbo rescuing the dwarves from the captivity of these spiders. Now, obviously here the brief was frightening, to frighten the audience, to give you a jump, to sort of have those sort of feelings. So again, let's look at how sound and picture, again together, sort of fed this suspense and narrative. So once again, you're probably getting the idea now. I'm going to play the source again without sound, and I'll narrate through it. But this time, keep your 3D glasses on, and and feel feel the full immersion. So guys, if we go over to the DCP. So again here, the color and the HFR really helped this scene creatively and technically. The dark, cold look kept the suspense up, and the fast cuts in 3D were greatly aided by high frame rate. The high frame rate also increased the clarity of the gory spiders, making them feel more real and scary. Now, stereoscopy, which is what we're here to talk about, had a huge role in adding the suspense and fright here. A healthy depth budget was used in this scene, giving real grandeur to Mirkwood and the whole sort of scene altogether. Now, personally, I felt this was one of the most immersive scenes in the Desolation of Smaug. Techniques like gigantism or high post stereo, they were used on the spiders, making them seem much larger than normal, really sort of amplifying the sort of foulness of these creatures. And finally, there were many moments of use of negative parallax to give the audience, to give you guys a bit of a fright, using the sort of jump technique. Things like fast keyframes, moving objects from positive and jumping out of the screen over a really short period of time. As I say, giving you that jump factor throughout. If I was to use a sound analogy here, just before I pass it on to Gilly, it's like turning up the sound really suddenly. It's always startling when someone does that to you. But Gilly will explain a bit more about that.
Yeah. So this the spider sequence is actually a really tricky one in terms of content as well as like mix and everything. So during the edit process, the sound edit process, sort of looking at the spiders, the initial approach was really about their size and weight and how heavy these creatures were. And we sort of came to the conclusion quite quickly that actually, they've got 8 legs, they support their weight really well. They're much creepier when they're sort of quiet and they scuttle around. So there was an approach taken initially that we evolved and went to a much quieter sounding spider than we started off with. There's also this need to get we've got the singular spiders, but also a need to feel that there were lots around us. So there's a lot of movement through the overheads in the Atmos, but also the surrounds where we feel the vocals and these really creepy textures, like scuttling textures that Peter really loved. With the amazing layered visuals, just fantastic visuals, and the large depth budget that Meetal talked about, we also need to make sure that the sounds really connect to the image. So I think in high frame rate and 3D, you're sort of aware of more detail in the image. So as you sort of, stuff moves, you're seeing a lot more. And the depth in the picture is also sort of more apparent as well. So placement of sounds, relating to that are really key. Like it's a lot more critical. The tolerances have gone with like 48 frames per second. To sort of match up to those visuals, some of the things we use, obviously there's levels of sound relative to one another. There's the use of reverb, so the effect of environment on a sound. So using the forest to our benefit to place stuff like back in the picture. Other tricks, just placement, positioning, sort of in the Atmos space or in the 7.1, are really key. The final aspect, and it kind of links in with what Meetal talked about, the positive to negative parallax, is that we've got this huge dynamic range in cinema. We're really lucky that we can go really, really quiet. So there's moments where Bilbo is first attacked by that spider and wrapped up, and then we go really, really quiet and creepy. And we're able to then suddenly inject power into the sound, so sort of really move the sound. And a lot of that works really, well and in harmony with the strong moves from like the positive space into the negative space, and we're sort of ramping up the power as you do that. And I think that's where it really sort of works in harmony. So if you chuck your glasses on, and we'll just play 3.2 with sound, and you can hopefully appreciate some of that.
Okay, so we've spoken a lot about sort of the narrative and the sound and how those things go together, but one of the really important parts of this film was the visual effects elements and making them seamless with the live action stereo. So what I'm going to do now is just take you through the next really cool scene where Bilbo and the dwarves are well on their way to Erebor, and they go to Lake-town, they get captured, they're looking for help and weapons and that sort of stuff. And the particular part we're going to look at is Thorin's speech to the men and women of Lake-town and the Master, and how some of the creative techniques we use there and visual effects techniques as well. So this time around, if everyone has their glasses on, we're going to just do a quick breakdown of source versus finals, and again, I'll narrate through what we're going to see here. So guys, if we go to the next DCP, here we go.
So this scene is really about showing off the VFX work, but I wanted to actually just, we're going to jump back when we play the DCP with sound, just a scene earlier where we've got the dwarves actually in the armory trying to steal weapons and the alarm's raised. And it's a really good example, again, dynamic example, but it's a really great example of sound, off-screen sound, so stuff that's not related to image, but just selling the story and raising the jeopardy. So we're actually going to start a little bit earlier than the sequence that Meetal's taken from there. And I just wanted, on this scene, it's quite a complex scene to mix, because there's not hundreds and hundreds of elements like a big action scene, but it's like a really emotional scene. There's a big speech and everything, and it's really a lot about how music hands over to dialogue and the crowd supports dialogue. So we're not actually going to play through the whole of that scene, but just as a whole, that's a really complex one, and one that took had a lot of input from Peter, and sort of in terms of the emotion and everything, and actually was one of the longest sequences to mix in the film, despite all the huge action and everything. So if we can just play, I think it's 4.2, the DCP with sound.
So finally, what we're going to do is introduce Smaug, the mighty dragon. Now, what we're going to do is look at, we're just going to talk about the technical and creative elements in picture and sound that we've spoken about all the way through from Beorn through to Lake-town, and affect this one amazing scene. So stereo, the techniques. In this particular one, there was great use of hyper and hypo stereo, showing the grandeur of, again, Smaug and Erebor itself. For me, it was a lot of fun doing the 3D on this particular bit, bringing Smaug out of the screen plane, and again, really immersing the audience and giving you the fright, giving you the funny moments, giving you the exciting moments. So it's really cool. One of the bits that we'll look at is one of my favorite parts of the film, is when he first, comes out of this gold, when Bilbo wakes him up. That was really cool, because you really feel him sort of come around the audience when it's playing. And again, the HFR was key here, because it really showed off the amazing sort of creative work from Weta, in terms of the technical textures and animation and all that sort of stuff. The performance capture by Benedict Cumberbatch was phenomenal on this sort of stuff. It really was cool. But yeah, Gilly, do you want to?
Yeah, I think like Meetal says, it sort of pulls together a lot of the sort of decision-making process and the tools that we use that are kind of similar. So you have the movement of Smaug, sort of his bulk, and it sort of ripples around the surrounds. There's a moment where he comes through the theatre, and it's that same thing that we really feel his size and his presence, but also it's really working with that strong sort of positive to negative parallax shift. Despite most of the scene is sort of diegetic sounds, we do have a moment where Bilbo's, compelled to pull the ring off, and we go into some design stuff there, and it works really, great in the sort of in terms of the audience and the sort of the space around the audience. You also have this just fantastically large dynamic range again. So with Smaug and Benedict Cumberbatch's performance, you've got this big dynamic in his performance anyway, and we're just sort of heightening that. And there's processing on his dialogue, but we're sort of really working hard to retain and enhance his performance, but not break it. We're really sort of working hard to do that in sound. So you get the feeling that he's coming close and whispering and sort of get that intimacy, and then you get the the full power. It's also off that vocal a lot. There's the use of reverb to put you in that big space and really play against the depth in the image. So it's a vast hall of gold, and we sort of really see that stretching back, but we also sort of hear it and feel that reverb. And to me, like, a couple of the most obvious moments of harmony are quite simple, I guess. Well, I say simple. They're like smaller moments maybe, but there's some really strong like negative parallax on Smaug coming in really close to Bilbo, and you've got like Bilbo's small movements, and I kind of hear his small voice, and then you've got this sniffing and this salivating of Smaug. I think you'll know it when you see it. That's a brief description. You know it when you see it. So I think it's really a brilliant kind of illustration of those things working in harmony. So I hope you take that away from this as well. So we're going to dive straight in and just play this one with full sound.
One last DCP.
Yep.
Cool. So if we just roll to that DCP, guys.
So I think that's us. I think there's a bit of a changeover. So I think that we can have a few questions. And
but before we do that, we'd just like to thank the Creative Summit for having us again this year, and also Wingnut Films, New Line Cinema, and Warner Brothers Pictures for the use of the material again. As Gilly mentioned, I think we've got a couple of minutes just for maybe one or two questions, just as they turn the technology back to Dolby. If there are any. Thank you.
It's about, there's a lot of talk about how Atmos is, I suppose, stimulating other senses when you combine Atmos with 3D.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about things such as audiences who see a matchstruck smelling phosphorus and feeling rain under the skin. Has there been any...
So it's synesthesia, isn't it? Like, so feeling that sort of thing. I think... There's like lots and lots of studies. I think I was talking to someone mentioned yesterday about how sound can impact taste. Like, I think there was an article in The Guardian a couple of days ago about low frequencies making things taste more bitter and high frequencies more sort of sweet. And I think just any added sense of realism is going to trigger things like that for the audience. So hopefully it does involve people more. It does sort of stimulate all senses, and I think you get that, sort of adrenaline rush from the image moving as well, and from, really coming out at you. So, I think there's...
whether you were actually considering looking at, I suppose, chasing that.
I'm not sure we're sort of chasing it specifically like that, but we certainly try a lot of stuff during the mix. I mean, the mix for this was about 17 weeks long, which is huge. That's about as big as you get on a film mix. So you're trying lots and lots of different things, and you're feeling that. Like, a lot of it comes down to, I'm sure it's the same with Meetal's stereo. A lot of it's personal taste and what it does to your senses and things like that. So we're trying that stuff and reacting to it, and if we like it, it goes in front of Peter, and if he likes it, it goes in the movie. So that's kind of how we react with that stuff. I guess we don't sort of necessarily think about it.
I think that's probably all the time we have, but I think Gilly and I will be out there so we can answer any other questions outside. Thanks guys.
Thank you. Cheers.